Hunger for Reform, Exposing Food Punishment and the Fight to Change. Subscribe now for more authentic crime tales. Remember to like, share, and engage with us in the comments below. It began with a scream echoing down the concrete hallway of an Arkansas state prison. Guards rushed to the segregation block, the air thick with the smell of something burning. Not fire, but food. Inside a small cell, 33-year-old inmate Kenneth McPherson lay motionless on the floor, his body weak, his lips cracked. On the steel tray beside him sat a block of what prisoners called the loaf, a tasteless, brick-like lump made of vegetables, flour, and powdered beans. It was cold, dry, and untouched. That day in 2018, the incident would trigger outrage far beyond the prison walls. Kenneth wasn't the first inmate to collapse after days on the loaf, and he wouldn't be the last. Inside the Arkansas Department of Corrections, the Nutriloaf, a meal once banned in several states, had returned as punishment for breaking prison rules. But now, one man's suffering had drawn national attention. As investigators photographed the scene, they noticed something chilling. The loaf had been served to Kenneth 3 times a day for over a week. He'd refused it after the 3rd day, begging for regular food, but staff records showed no change in his diet. The camera flash reflected off the tray, illuminating the dull orange hue of the so-called disciplinary meal. When a reporter later obtained internal documents, they revealed that complaints about the loaf had been piling up for years, inmates reporting severe weight loss, dizziness, and stomach pain. Civil rights lawyers called it starvation disguised as discipline. The next morning, a local journalist broke the story. Arkansas inmate collapses after being fed punishment loaf. Within hours, activists, attorneys, and former inmates were demanding an investigation into the use of food as punishment in state prisons. But what investigators found would only deepen the mystery. Records showed that prison officials had quietly authorized the loaf as a behavioral management tool, despite earlier lawsuits warning against its use. Emails revealed confusion over who approved it and silence from top administrators. When a whistleblower guard came forward weeks later, his testimony shocked even the most hardened prison advocates. He claimed staff were told to use the loaf not only for violent offenders, but also for inmates who talked back, missed roll call, or refused to clean their cells. "I didn't think it was right," he said, his voice trembling in a recorded interview. "We were told it was just policy. But watching men waste away over a piece of bread, that's not policy. That's punishment." As the news spread, state officials promised a review. But behind closed doors, emails showed panic. The department feared lawsuits, protests, and media exposure. And just when it seemed the scandal had peaked, an investigator uncovered something that would turn the case upside down, a trail leading not just to Arkansas, but to other states using the same secretive punishment. The question wasn't just who authorized it, but how many people had suffered because of it. Weeks after Kenneth McPherson's collapse, the story had spread beyond Arkansas. Reporters began connecting dots, similar cases in Illinois, New York, and Pennsylvania, where inmates had described nearly identical disciplinary meals. In one state report, a prisoner claimed the loaf was so dry it tore the skin off my mouth. In another, medical staff warned that inmates were losing dangerous amounts of weight. What started as one man's story was becoming a national crisis. Civil rights attorney Dana Caldwell, who had spent years fighting against inhumane prison practices, took up Kenneth's case. She stood before cameras, holding up a photograph of the loaf. "This," she said, "is not food. This is control." Her voice echoed across the courthouse steps. Behind her, families of other inmates held signs reading, "Feed humans, not punish them." Inside the prison walls, tension was rising. Guards whispered about internal memos, warnings from supervisors to keep quiet about meal practices. Some staff feared losing their jobs. Others had begun documenting everything. An anonymous letter arrived at Caldwell's office. It contained copies of official logs showing over 40 inmates had been placed on the loaf in the last 3 months alone. Investigators soon learned that the punishment loaf had been authorized under a vague clause, alternative nutritional measures, meant to maintain order. But there was no medical review, no oversight, and no standard on how long someone could be kept on it. In some cases, Inmates had eaten nothing but the loaf for 2 weeks straight. Meanwhile, the Department of Corrections continued to defend its policy. A spokesperson told the press, "The loaf meets basic nutritional requirements. It is not punishment, it's a tool for safety." But medical experts disagreed. One doctor described the practice as slow deprivation. It weakens the body without leaving visible marks. Public outrage grew. Lawmakers called for hearings, and advocates pushed for reform. Dana Caldwell filed a federal lawsuit against the state, demanding the complete ban of food-based punishment. During a hearing, she read from a letter written by Kenneth before his collapse. His words sent a chill through the courtroom. "They say it's food, but it's not. It's like eating dirt and glue. I can feel myself fading." That letter became the centerpiece of the case. But just as the legal fight began gaining traction, a deeper, darker layer emerged. An investigative journalist from the Marshall Project uncovered a trail of correspondence between multiple state officials and a private food contractor. The emails hinted that the loaf wasn't just an internal policy, it was part of a cost-saving measure designed to reduce kitchen expenses. In one email, a contractor wrote, "The loaf program significantly cuts costs. No need for daily meal prep. Minimal ingredients, maximum compliance." The revelation sent shockwaves through the justice system. The question had now changed from "why was this allowed?" to "who was profiting from it?" That night, Dana received a phone call from a frightened corrections employee who refused to give his name. His voice shook as he whispered one final warning before hanging up. "It goes higher than you think. If you dig deeper, you'll find more than just bad food." When the anonymous caller's words echoed through the line, "It goes higher than you think," Dana Caldwell knew this wasn't just about food anymore. It was about power, secrecy, and money flowing through the prison system like an invisible current. Over the next few weeks, she and investigative reporter Miles Denton worked side by side, piecing together emails, invoices, and testimony from former employees. What they uncovered painted a disturbing picture. The same food contractor that produced the disciplinary loaf supplied dozens of prisons nationwide. Internal documents revealed financial bonuses tied to meal efficiency, a coded term for cutting costs by limiting ingredients and using the loaf as a replacement for full meals. Dana's legal team subpoenaed those records, and the state tried to block their release. But one whistleblower, a retired kitchen supervisor named Elaine Foster, stepped forward. Her testimony in court changed everything. Calm but trembling, she described being instructed to bake hundreds of loaves at once, days before use, and store them in unsanitary conditions. "We were told to ration," she said. "We called it the brick. It was so hard. Some men broke their teeth on it." The courtroom fell silent. Outside, protests grew louder. Activists surrounded correctional departments across multiple states, chanting, "Food is a right, not a weapon." News stations aired footage of trays of the loaf alongside hospital reports showing inmates suffering from malnutrition. Public opinion began to shift. The country was finally listening. Meanwhile, the Department of Justice opened an investigation into inhumane food practices in state prisons. In a leaked memo, investigators found that top officials had been warned years earlier that the loaf might violate constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment, but they ignored it. Why? Because the savings were too profitable to stop. When the findings became public, outrage turned into action. Lawmakers introduced a federal reform bill, the Humane Correctional Food Act. The bill sought to ban all punitive meal systems nationwide and ensure nutritional oversight by independent health boards. Kenneth McPherson's name was mentioned on the floor of Congress. His story, once buried inside a cold cell, had become the spark of a national reckoning. But the fight wasn't over. As reforms slowly moved through the system, more stories emerged, letters from inmates in other states describing the same loaf punishment, the same starvation disguised as discipline. It became clear this wasn't one isolated case. It was a culture built on silence. In one haunting scene during a televised hearing, Dana held up Kenneth's original tray, sealed in evidence. The loaf had hardened into a grayish block. "This," she said firmly, "was how America fed its prisoners." The image went viral overnight, Headlines read, "The meal that shook the system." Across social media, millions demanded change, and for the first time in decades, the phrase "food as punishment" entered mainstream conversation. Months later, the state officially banned the loaf. Kenneth's mother stood before reporters, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "My son didn't die for nothing. Maybe now, someone else will live." As cameras panned across the courthouse, Dana Caldwell watched quietly from the steps. The sun dipped behind the building, casting a faint blue light across the crowd. Justice, she thought, doesn't always arrive in a single verdict. Sometimes, it comes in the hunger that refuses to be ignored. The screen fades to black, leaving the echo of her voice. This was never just about food. It was about dignity.